Okay, it is January 28th, 2020, and today we're going to talk about Penn State University in particular, though some of this I'm sure applies to other colleges and universities as well. First of all, we all know in American society that the cost of tuition and colleges and universities in general has gone completely out of sight in the last 20, 30, 40 years. Now, just to go to a state university, we'll pick on Penn State in particular, this is where I live in central Pennsylvania, is now approximately $25,000 a year per student to attend, which is more than somebody earning the minimum wage makes for an entire year of work, full-time, 40 hours a week, every single week. And the question that remains is, why is university and college tuition so absurdly expensive? I paid about $3,000 a year when I went to school in the early 80s. I think certainly a big part of this is the same problem the healthcare system has, and that is having a third-party payer. Namely, with the healthcare system, it might be insurance and the government, which interferes with the natural flow of economical supply and demand, or ability to pay. And so when you put a third-party payer in, the universities say, oh, I've got government grants and scholarships and all kinds of loans that can just go on and on almost indefinitely, to the tune of several $1 trillion of student debt we now have. And of course, once the universities know that the government will lend the students endless thousands of dollars, all they do is just raise the tuition higher and higher and higher every year. It's getting to the point where to go to some of the most famous private universities, it can literally cost $250,000 to almost $500,000 just to get a 4-year college degree, which has no guarantees of producing a good outcome in terms of a high-paying, interesting career. It certainly, statistically, having a college degree does increase your chances of having a better job. We all know that. On the other hand, there are countless exceptions to this. People who never went to college, some who never even finished high school, who are some of the most successful people in the society, both in terms of their own personal happiness, satisfaction, as well as their financial outcome. Originally, colleges and universities existed for the good of the society as a almost charitable type institution. They were there to produce an education for our society and greatly improve the quality of life for American people. Now, and I certainly see this particularly here at Penn State, they've gone to the corporate model, monetizing their reputation, making countless millions of dollars on football and other sports. You go to a football game or even the Spikes baseball or other events at the Bryce Jordan Center, you're paying upwards of $4 for less than a penny's worth of water. Something's terribly wrong with this. The greed at Penn State is truly obnoxious and immoral, to say the least. They could charge 50 cents for a bottle of water and still make plenty of profit, let alone the $5 hot dogs that cost about 20 cents a piece. Penn State really is just a giant cash register sitting on the hill over there, just endlessly raking in the money, while many students are buried in debt till they're in their 30s, having to delay marriage, delay buying a house, struggling to buy cars, many of them still living in their parents' homes because they cannot afford to be on their own. As I said earlier, a degree does not guarantee a high-paying job. Many students I meet say they're majoring in psychology and kinesiology and English and other liberal arts programs their debt is going to cost them more than it's worth. Let's say, for example, let's just say you have $50,000 of debt when you graduate, and you take 10 years to pay that off. In reverse, let's just pretend you don't go to school and you take the $50,000 of debt, or even the other $50,000 that's non-debt that paid for the part of the tuition. You might have $50,000 to $100,000 or more if you had invested that money in an average level of mutual funds, stocks and bonds and things of that sort. You'd be worth several $1,000,000 by the age of 50 to 55 with no problem at all. And I'm not saying, oh, just don't go to college because you can throw the money in the stock market and just get rich when you're older. That's not necessarily the case, but it is a fact of how money works and numbers. Another major issue with Penn State University is this alcohol and partying life. When you go to high school, you graduate, the purpose to go to college is to get a higher education so that one day you can have a better job, a high-paying, interesting career, not to waste away getting drunk every weekend, using marijuana, drugs, having sex with people you don't care about. I mean, I understand we all go through the age of late adolescence from about age 17 to 23 where it's a difficult transition into adulthood, but this is not what college is about. And I also understand that on Friday and Saturday night, when you don't feel like studying, you want to mingle with other kids and have fun and do things. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is something wrong with getting completely drunk. Penn State has several students that die every year from overdoses of alcohol. This is completely unnecessary, and there's no excuse why Penn State University can't be tougher on alcohol. Oh, sure, they've tried to make some different rules for the fraternities and sororities and a little bit of stuff. But you really want to be tough, Penn State? You catch a student drunk, they get one offense drunk, they're out for a whole semester. On the second offense, they never come back to the university. This is what I call being tough on alcohol, not just a little slap in the face, a few hundred or a couple $1,000 fine for a DUI, and the next week they're back in class again. No, that's not going to work anymore. If you really want to get rid of alcohol, you have to get tough. And the way to get tough is to throw the kids out of school. You do that 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 times, the word will spread, and the drinking will basically come to a stop. And there's nothing wrong with having a drink, having a couple of beers once in a while at the football game. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this 80% of students getting completely bombed every week. This is ridiculous. And it's a problem at many universities and colleges around the country, of course. But Penn State is known to be among the worst for this college partying life, which is a bunch of BS, to be quite honest. Let alone the cost not only to the student's health, the extra risk that it puts students in becoming permanent lifelong alcoholics, and the cost of the alcohol itself, which probably adds up to maybe a couple $1,000s over a 4 years education. Money that could be used to pay down your debt, money that could be used to invest in put into a Roth IRA and it'll be worth $100,000 when you're 60 years old. And I could go on and on about the benefits of that. Another thing that I think really tees people off about Penn State is parking. You know, I understand that students who don't commute to school and don't have a car, they don't pay anything for parking. I also understand that if they do commute, they need to have a permit and maybe pay, I don't know, $10, $25 a semester, something reasonable. But what Penn State is charging for parking is totally outrageous. And worse yet, they're charging employees to park. I never heard of anywhere in the United States I've lived, and believe me, I've lived in Massachusetts, I have lived in Louisiana, I have lived in the Chicago area, and Austin, Texas, and I've worked for several dozen employers throughout my life, And I have never been required to pay to park my car to go to work. And I think that's absolutely absurd. They're making enough money in sports and outrageous tuition and everything else. That's just not necessary. Another interesting thing about colleges and universities these days, Penn State in particular, they really push diversity training. We've got to treat everybody equal: lesbians, gays, LGBT, black, Chinese, whites, people from anywhere in the world. Great. I treat everybody the same too. I don't care anything about what color anybody is. I don't care if they're gay. None of that makes the slightest bit of difference to me at all. I treat everybody the same. As Martin Luther King said, judge a man by his character, not by his color. Completely agree with all that. However, Penn State does not obey its own rules. They discriminate against their own employees. I have worked for Penn State on and off, some odd jobs for over 20 years. A couple of years ago, I was working cleaning a dormitory in the South Dorms department with a full-time employee. And she and I were in the break room discussing, just having a little discussion for 5 or 10 minutes before we started working. And she asked me something about what I thought about gay marriage. Well, I happen to be a conservative. I happen to not believe, I happen to believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. That doesn't mean I'm homophobic or I don't like gays or any of that nonsense. It's simply a belief I have. Nobody else was in the break room, and I simply said, I tend to believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. Immediately fired from the job the next day, never permitted to return to that part of the university. I was having a discussion off the clock during lunch in the break room at the Penn Stater Hotel 2 or 3 years ago, and they were discussing the Sandusky sex abuse case. We were all at a table, 4 or 5 of us, and I was with some mostly students chatting about it, and some of them asked me my opinion, and I have a father who specialized in constitutional law, privacy rights, among other things. And I simply said something to the effect of about privacy rights and what people can look at on their computer, pornography, whatever. And about 10 minutes later, I finished my lunch, went back upstairs to the working area, and within less than a minute, the manager, a man named Rahul, physically grabbed me by the arm and then actually grabbed me this way and dragged me about 40 to 50 feet toward his office and toward the top, then around a corner where there are no security cameras, incidentally, and had me at the top of the flight of stairs and threatened to throw me down a flight of stairs, calling me a pedophile because I believe that Sandusky was a good man or whatever, which is absolute garbage. I'm glad he's in jail. He can stay there the rest of his life for abusing children or molesting them. Number 3, I was serving soup at the Nittany Lion Inn only about maybe 6 or 7 months ago. And a couple of customers were in line getting soup, and I was serving the soup. And they were having a discussion about the immigration issue and illegal immigrants coming in over the southern border. And they asked me what I thought. And I said, I'm not permitted to discuss politics on the job. I simply support the laws of the country. Told never to come back, fired, not only never come back to the Nittany Lion Inn, never permitted to work at Penn State University ever again. I guess I'm a homophobe, a racist, and a pedophile, according to them. Very, very interesting. And I found out that because Pennsylvania, as well as most other states, have what's called at-will employment, I talked to 2 or 3 lawyers. I can't sue for discrimination, even though they blatantly discriminated against a happily married man, married almost 40 years, incidentally. The thought of pedophilia, racism, or homophobia is completely out of my bounds. Just amazing what happened. Another thing with employment at Penn State is they have the Teamsters union there, that used to be run by Jimmy Hoffa, who was killed many years ago in a corruption scandal or something. And I was cooking in the dining commons for a couple of years on what's called wage payroll, which means you get basically minimum wage, no benefits such as retirement or health insurance or days off or any of that. And I understand that. But right next to me, a man, women doing exactly the same job, they're making $18 to $20 an hour while I'm making $9 an hour for exactly the same job. Talk about discrimination? Oh, they're union. Well, I'm sorry. A union employee shouldn't be paid 1 penny more than a non-union employee. I understand maybe they get more benefits. They get their retirement and their insurance and legal rights to their job security, et cetera, et cetera. I will accept that. But you don't pay somebody less than half of what somebody else is earning for exactly the same job. Wrong. And they're still doing it. It may be legal, obviously it is. They're getting away with it for probably 30 or 40 years. But morally and ethically, that is just terrible. I would just never send a kid to Penn State University. The partying, the alcohol, the high tuition, terrible treatment of its employees. I've heard lots of other employees, by the way, complain about very similar things that I'm discussing here. This is not particularly extraordinary, just on me. And I'm confused why all these alumni give endless thousands, even millions of dollars to Penn State. I understand, they want their name on a building, they're super rich and they can give Penn State $20 million or $50 million to build another engineering building or something like that. Fine, but I would cut down on whatever you're giving to Penn State and find some other charities that are a lot more ethical and moral and operate on a more decent basis than Penn State University. Thank you.